I want to thank everyone for joining us and welcome to today's ELGL webinar titled The Three Norsemen of the Datapocolypse. I'm ELGL Executive Director Kirsten Wyatt, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's presentation. ELGL is the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network, and we engage the brightest minds in local government. And one of the ways we do this is to provide exceptional and free online training about local government topics. This webinar is for ELGL members. If you have logged on and you're not yet a member, please join us. You can sign up at elgl.org/membership. Memberships are $30 a person, and they enable us to provide awesome content like today's session. And please note that our dues are going up on July 1st to $40 a person, so sign up today if you haven't already. We also save a recording of today's webinar in the ELGL webinar library, located in the members-only section of the website. And today, we're excited to introduce ELGL to the three Buffalo Grove Norsemen. Steve Fritz is a management analyst, Tom Milas is the forestry manager, and Mike Skibbe is the deputy director of public works, all in the village of Buffalo Grove. The Norsemen will help us navigate the path of data discomfort, improve your approach to change management, and elevate your game with data collection automations. Before we begin, I want you to know that your microphones and conference phones are muted, and this makes the webinar enjoyable and efficient for everyone. During and after the presentation, we will open up for your questions, and these may be submitted using the chat box. I will ask these questions as they come in, so the recording of the webinar also includes the questions for our guests. Today's webinar is part of ELGL's Jam of the Month series, where we take our formidable content, online and social media outreach on a deep dive into a particular topic area. And this month, Cartograph is spinning the hits with blogs about community engagement, change management, and process improvement, plus a great podcast with Nick Kittle and today's webinar. And you can check out all of these resources at elgl.org/cartograph. We will be live today's webinar, and you can follow along with the hashtag ELGLJam, and be sure to use the Twitter handles for today. You can use @Cartograph, @TomMillis, @Fritzy00, @MSkibbe, and @NorsemanOf. And we are giving away some great Cartograph swag and your very own Norseman hat to one lucky member of our webinar today who social shares some of the key quotes from the presentation. And just make sure you use the ELGLJam hashtag when you share that. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to our talented presenters from the village of Buffalo Grove.
Thank you, Kirsten. So good afternoon, everyone. We originally presented this at the Cartograph National Convention out in Denver this year, and we were focused on our new rollout of an asset management software here in Buffalo Grove and how it was kind of perceived in our organization. So while you might not be rolling out Cartograph specifically, but call us if you are, any organizational change might be met with discomfort in your groups. And we'd like to talk about innovation in general and then share some examples from our Public Works Department. So first, a quick note about my use of the word innovation. Innovation is a buzzword. Sometimes people treat just purchasing a new software as innovation itself, but it's really the people and the processes that you get to work on in conjunction with the new software rollout that is where the innovation truly lies. So that's where we're focused today. So welcome to the Datapocolypse here. Any software implementation may not be well received by your agency. Some employees may push back on it, and some employees, especially in our organization, saw collecting data as apocalyptic. So we're the Three Norsemen. We're here to plot everyone's demise, or maybe we're just trying to innovate in Buffalo Grove. Buffalo Grove is a small community in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. We've got about 42,000 residents, and we're pretty awesome. We might not be perfect because sometimes we hear things in the background like, this data is going to replace me, or this new software is going to replace me, or this new innovation is going to replace me. And really the message we're trying to drive home is that no, it's really here to help you. And then we might hear, why is this my responsibility? Is it my job to do the work, or is it my job to collect the data? Well, really it's both. We want you to collect the data on the work you're doing as a way to control your own destiny. And what I mean by that is that we We need to focus on what we're good at and maybe move away from some of the things that we aren't good at. We should control our destiny by being able to compare ourselves to outside contractors or outsourcing or other ways that our services might be delivered. We do want to be able to prove that we're the best and we're doing it the best way we can. And then you might hear, the old way was better, it's faster, it's stronger, because I can't get much wronger, according to Kanye. And it's the old way was comfortable, probably. It may not have been the best way. There might have been process improvements, but everybody was used to it and it was comfortable, and that's why we were doing it that way. So if we're going to panic about it, right, then the Norsemen are going to have a little fun with it. So we could have been discouraged, but instead we decided to own it. So bring on the Datapocolypse and own the discomfort. I'm Mike Skibbe in the middle there, and having the only Norseman with the golden locks, I got saddled with the hat with the braids on the side there, quite stylish. Steve Fritz is our management analyst here at Buffalo Grove. He's on the right, and he's got that chrome dome. He's built for speed. Tom Milas is on the left. He's our forestry manager, and he, after 3 pots of coffee a day, needs a little pressure relief valve on the top there. So these are the Three Norsemen, and we hate duplicate data entry the way we've always done it, and the Danish. The Danish are the true enemy of the Norsemen, especially the cheese Danish. Who puts cheese on a pastry? So let's talk about innovative culture a little bit before we get started in some examples here at Public Works. Gary Pisano, in his Harvard Business Review article earlier this year, the January-February 19 issue, is also available online if you Google it, but Gary talks about how innovative culture might be messy, and that's okay. So, a fun culture at your, business or at your place of employment, maybe your Google or maybe your Facebook and you got ping pong in the break room, but it's not all fun and games and innovation. There needs to be some balance. So he's got 5 key points that he hits on, and these really fit in with what we found at Buffalo Grove, and I think summarizes the process pretty well. Key point number 1 from Gary is that you should have a tolerance for failure, but no tolerance for incompetence. We can fail 5 or 10% of the time, right? And that's probably okay. We're active, we're engaged, we're in motion, and some things are going to work and some things aren't going to work, but we tried. The problem is if you start to fail 50, 60, 70% of the time, well, now you've moved into the incompetence part, right? And you need to take a step back from there. Which rolls right into point number 2. Having a willingness to experiment, but be highly disciplined when you do experiment. We can't just try a whole bunch of random stuff, right? We have to be engaged in what we're doing. We have to discuss, changes and processes with our employees. We can't just rule from the top. So we need to talk about what is working, what's not working, what could be improved. Even in that comfortable old process, there's things that we could do better. But let's not change for change's sake. Let's engage our employees. Let's make sure that everybody's on board and remain disciplined in what we're experimenting with. Point number 3 is that we need to be psychologically safe, but brutally candid. Now, this more speaks to kind of the emotional health side of the organization, right? Your best friend could probably say a lot of candid things to you, but that's because you have a safe relationship with them. If our employees don't feel safe, if they feel like they might get outsourced, which is one of the comments that we've heard, if they feel like they're somehow not safe in their job by collecting all this data on them, well, then you're not going to be able to have the candid conversations that you need to have to innovate. His point number 4 is that you need collaboration, but with individual accountability. And really what he's speaking to in this point here is don't let people get lost in a big team. Make sure everybody's engaged individually still. And finally, he talks about flat leadership, but strong leadership, right? So flat leadership, a flat organizational chart, it's quick for communications. Things can happen, people can talk to any other level of the organization pretty quickly, but that speed also means that you can derail fairly quickly. And leaders must be strong and on top of things if you're going to operate at that speed. So every good implementation needs a mantra. And just to give you some background on where we're at in Buffalo Grove Public Works, we were coming from a Lotus Notes database of work orders. We had various Excel spreadsheets that were tracking time and unit cost reports. And so employees were entering time in one location, they were entering data in another. And really, things were kind of happening 3 or 4 times over the course of getting a job completed. So our mantra through this process was don't enter data twice. And with a mantra, everybody tends to know the answers to the questions at heart since it's giving you that kind of guideline, that overall direction of where things are going. So even if you don't know all the questions on the front end, at least a mantra like this kind of helped guide us as we ran into problems with our innovation. We have three integrated technologies that kind of let, technology get out of the way of innovation here at Buffalo Grove. Technology should be a catalyst and not a specific path to innovation. So here in Buffalo Grove, we have a GIS consortium that we're members of. There's 30 communities in the Chicagoland region that share services for GIS project work and GIS mapping. And all that GIS background gets tied into our Cartograph work order asset management system that allows us to track, our labor, our time, our materials, everything that goes into jobs that we do is, supported in the back end by GIS, but then data driven out in the field with iPads with all our maintenance workers collecting data as they get jobs accomplished. But we can't forget about our residents in this whole thing, and our BG Connect app, which is driven by Acella's public stuff, ties us to our residents where they can, put in a request right on their phone. It's directly integrated with Cartograph so that our managers and our workers, get notified of what those requests are and can assign tasks to accomplish those tasks. And then all that data feeds right back out to the resident where we let them know, what was accomplished, what work was done to respond to their request. So with that general overview of where we're at with technology and how we're moving forward in innovation, Tom Milas is going to talk about kind of some of the things that we've run into on the forestry side in the forestry Datapocolypse. We'll work on our fonts.
Thanks, Mike. So the journey began pretty much, about 5 or so years ago. As far as the forestry side, it started, for me, I was on the selection team when it came for asset management. Mike, how do you just thank you. So as part of the team, as we started, identifying companies that dealt with asset management, we began to learn just how important a good software selection is. What you were trying to meet, the goals and objectives. Now, being a part of that, I saw this as a kind of a no-brainer. This pretty much, no matter what we selected, we were going down a path that was going to be way better than what we were. We weren't going to be, as Mike suggested a little bit earlier, putting data in multiple locations. We'd be able to marry kind of this the system of data between like spatial recognition with GIS. And, my head just kind of blew off and I thought this was going to be wonderful and pretty much an easy transition. So in Buffalo Grove, we've been a Tree City USA for over 30 years. So, having records related to our trees are our assets. We've been collecting information forever, just in weird places. I've been here now 21 years. When I first started, we were actually using large paper map books. And only, 21 years to me isn't a very long time ago, but we were tracking all that information, paper and pencil. You'd have just a small section of a map, a few streets on this map. The tree locations were penciled in. The tree name was right there. If we removed the tree, we were just, locating. We're actually just notating. And at the end of every year, you would go through page by page of the map, use a calculator, and add up every maple tree that you had, add up every oak tree that you had. It was pretty interesting. But shortly after that, and very shortly after that, we went with a Lotus database. We were starting to collect information, but we were just collecting what we were doing. We weren't, marrying the time to it, and it was just fields. It was just data. It was a spreadsheet. It wasn't this collection that everything came together on. Well, anyway, forestry has always been a very squared off unit. So, in my mind, I thought this was going to be a pretty easy transition. We were already, fairly tech savvy. I mean, we had a couple laptops in the vehicles at that moment, and why not? I mean, the technology that we're trying to bring in is actually going to be easier. So, hey, this should be a piece of cake. Well, when you roll something like this out, and it is quite a surprise to the people out in the field doing the information. I mean, we, in essence, kind of thrust our will upon them. There was plenty of warning. We had some training, and there was, there was a lot of pushback. We got some generational differences in the section for sure. Most of us are over 40, but we have a wide range of differences just in forestry alone. Immediately the old way worked better. This wasn't my job. We're going to lose our jobs. But the thing with pencil and paper is there's a lot of inconsistent data entry. There's misspellings. There's capitalizations. There's a lot of things. So that inconsistency kind of carried forward as we moved into the Lotus notes. But now, as we're moving forward, all of this is kind of captured, and we're trying to uniformly capture our data. And guys were really kind of put off by it. They were really afraid that all of this information, as they started seeing the information, they were going to start losing their jobs. They just didn't understand why people wanted to see all this information in real time, and why they had to do a little bit more in the field as far as the tech side of it. They just weren't looking at it was part of their job. I have this picture up here. The picture is kind of a joke, little tongue in cheek kind of. Our system that we use, little isn't really working. Well, he knows that for any residential request that comes in, I require a photograph to be attached to anything in the system that we're using. And since it wasn't working, made it a point to give me a quick drawing and make sure that the old pen and paper, or the pencil and paper, always works. So I actually took that information and made sure that's part of that actual photograph is part of our thing. Don't be afraid of the data. We've been pushing and pushing and pushing, and as time goes on, a lot of the people are catching on, and they're starting to understand a little bit more. But it wasn't easy. I mean, it's not quick results when you start collecting this information. But over a little bit of time after capturing it, you can understand that we're going to start using the data to make better choices, better decisions of our daily activities. Just before we began down this road, forestry section had noticed that we had been a little bit behind in the trees. We don't just manage 21,000 trees in our right of ways. We manage turf grass, we manage naturalized areas as well. But at that point in time, we had contracted tree trimming services at that moment. So you can see, before we even get gone down this road, that guys were already unsettled. That if we're contracting, their jobs might be up next, and at that point in time, the understanding wasn't really that, well, this could be helping and benefiting us down the road. Well, anyway, a little bit of information, a little bit of data entry, and we found out that we were actually providing service, tree maintenance at a much better level than we were contracting it out for. So we were able to go down a different route and quickly identify that our landscape service is something that we were actually doing fairly poorly, as comparatively speaking. We to contract out a landscape service, I know in our area we don't have to pay prevailing wage for something like this. So at that point in time, we were able to quickly identify that they were a contract was smoking us like by 300%, and we were able to turn that and change that and put more of our energy back into the trees. So our energy has since gone back into the trees, and we've made great progress ever since. Now, data isn't necessarily about what can we ourselves to the contractors and what. But with a few years of data into the system, we were quickly able to identify special needs. When it came down to vehicle replacements, I was able to show quickly come up with the information that we use in our asset management software, put it together, compile the information, so I can show how many trucks have been using from other sections. Do we need to replace a pickup with a pickup, or should we replace a pickup with a standalone chip truck that doesn't have a plow? Are we wasting time with, in one area or another? Okay, no, I hear it. All right, that's fine. I thought there was a mouse running on the keys. Sorry about that. So we were able to quickly identify. So the other year, I kind of coined it as the year of the arborist, where I was able to take these wins of the data that we had entered, and we were able to get equipment that maybe we didn't necessarily get in years prior, but we were able to make educated, data-driven decisions for this. Snow and ice, had been slowing us down. And prior, when we were in snow and ice operations during the winter, we would be, taking the vehicles and always converting them back and forth into plow vehicles and the chip trucks and the plow vehicles and the chip trucks. And, having information on hand and being able to show, that loss in production and that time spent, quickly goes a long way to, finding other vehicles best suited. So don't enter data twice, go back to it. All our information just goes in the cartograph. Everything can be expelled. It doesn't have to go anywhere else. Now, like I said a little bit earlier, we also manage way more, than trees. And, I say way more, but is the forestry and ground section. We spend our time. We managed 155 acres of turf grass. We managed 170 acres of naturalized areas. So before this, those just would have been things that we did. And now, as time goes on, we're not limiting ourselves to just the canned assets that you've seen. We're actually creating our own assets into our software that we can track, such as naturalized areas that we have. We can put original plans of areas where we have retentions and stuff like this. We can put our burn permits, our letters to residents. We can store it. It's all being stored into a centralized location. Everything that we do, we're making very unique tasks, unique input that we are, selectively looking for. And, it could be just about anything your heart's desire at that point in time. One of our next areas that we're going to pull in through from our GIS into our system are going to be the turf grass areas. Kind of vital as some of these areas change and areas get redeveloped. What is proper borders and stuff like this. And now we won't have to go and, go into other sections and, just in the GIS, we'll be able to make area location edits ourselves and then, tie all our contract information to this, where all that information is housed. It quickly isn't, but it's going in that direction, and we're going to make this happen. As we move on, our G life here. All right. As we quickly as we move on, we have many automations that we can use as a part of the software that we're using. Like for instance, we're out in the field. We take a tree down, and all the next steps are automated for us as soon as on completion of a task that we create. So once we remove a tree, locate tasks are quickly generated for us. They're split off into two sections, so we can have a locate done. We know that we have to go market, call our local Julie company up. They do the locations for us. We come back, do our stump grinding. We finish that task. It's automatically made up with a parkway restoration. Everything is constant. We don't have to make separate sheets, separate spreadsheets, Word documents, anything that we did in years prior, we don't have to do anymore. And it's all specially located on a map with dots. Creates an immense time saving, especially when you're doing it on the level. When you're talking, 2-3 tasks at a time, it's no big deal. But when you're talking, in a year or 6 months, depending on what your programs are out there, and I live in the forestry world, so obviously my example is in forestry, but all of this time savings is just huge energy that we put back into the program. It means we're getting more done at any one given time. Feel like I rambled, and I apologize, but that's it. My transition wasn't very smooth. Come on.
Oh. All right. Well, to piggyback onto Tom's automations, as the management analyst, that's one of my main jobs, is to kind of look at what we do on a daily basis and basically trying to make life easier for our guys in the field. I came from the field. I worked a long time in the street section. I worked in some sewer and some stormwater stuff as well. So I'm pretty well versed in what goes on out there and how to make life a little bit easier for those guys out in the field. So that's mainly my main purpose. And I take umbrage with the chrome dome. I mean, I want to be bald. I shave my head purposely because I'm cheap, not because I'm actually bald. So I just want that noted for the record. All right. So we wanted to look at automations in little places. And where I started to look at this was our daily vehicle checks, our personal protective equipment, and our first aid kits. Each one of these came off of the daily vehicle check, which was our big one that we won a Clarity Award for. Shout out to ELGL. So basically, we wanted to find a way to reduce our amount of paper and our workflows. And these were the three low-hanging fruit that we kind of focused on initially. So our daily vehicle checks, I like this picture of Snoopy in a psychedelic Grateful Dead long strange trip, because it all started when I watched Tom walk past my desk carrying a computer box paper full of papers, and he walked by and I was like, oh, that's really weird. And then he walked by again carrying a second and then a third, and I was like, what in the world is going on? So I asked him, I said, Tom, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm finally recycling these years worth of daily vehicle checks that I have to hold on to. And I was like, hold on. And so we talked through this process of what our daily vehicle checks involved. And it turns out that from the moment that a inline worker checked his truck on a actual sheet of paper, that then went to a manager for a signature, and then that signature and paper went to our fleet manager, and he had to sign off on it. And then that paper had to come back to the manager, and the manager was then required to scan it in and then hold a digital copy and a paper copy for a year. And so this whole process went right against our don't enter data twice. I mean, we had multiple people touching this piece of paper, and we didn't know where we stood in terms of when a truck was going to be fixed, or when a truck was fixed, or when, even if we could communicate we had a problem. And so we wanted to really shorten that trip and reduce the time that it took for us to not only process a work order for a vehicle, but also just in terms of managing a workflow. So there we go. See, I won the Clarity Award for this. And It was very fun. I did not like having the video played in front of everyone there because the screen was ginormous and I was very self-conscious. I don't know if this will play or not. Oh, it is. All right, so now you'll get to watch my big head on this as well. So. Oh, hello. Here at Buffalo Grove, we're pretty awesome, but we don't want to just stop there. As we continue to evolve into high-performance government, we realize it's not always about big, flashy projects. Sometimes it's conquering that daily grind. Let me tell you about daily vehicle check sheets. Every day, staff has to inspect 55 vehicles, and each inspection completed gives us a sheet. And that sheet has to be processed, filed, and stored, and what we end up with are 13,000 pieces of paper. It's just not awesome. Every year, we're doing more with less, and we're not hiring new staff, and we're not raising taxes. But we can't just give up on our citizens. So how can we streamline our processes so that we can focus on the activities that best serve our public? For example, we're writing down information with a piece of paper and a pencil. And like Colin's beard, it's just not awesome. There has to be a better way. How do we take this and make it more awesome? I mean, we are awesome. So can't we digitize this? Can't we put this somehow onto an iPad so that we can do it right at our truck? And the answer is, yes, we can. And like Carl's beautiful beard, it is awesome. Using Cartograph OMS, we are able to digitize our daily vehicle check sheet, and right when it's completed, it's stored automatically. And beyond that, we are able to put our request for service tickets right in the minute a problem is found. So what we have is the elimination of 13,000 sheets of paper. We gain back 35 work days a year, and we're saving over $20,000 a year. That's high performance, and that's awesome. All right, so that was our video, which I will have it also stated for the record, we did in 2 takes with no edits. So for all the other people who want to maybe win an ELGL Clarity Award, I feel like we set a pretty high bar, but you know, I'm just saying. Anyhow, all right. So what we did after taking that automation and seeing the success that it was just by creating a workflow that allowed the minute that a request was done, everyone was notified, everything was stored in, say, Cartograph. We now know how many times we checked a vehicle. We know how much we've actually spent checking vehicles. And now we have a direct tie to see when that work was done. It really did clean up that process. And so it moved us into PPE gear, which was, again, another paper form inspection that we did, that we do quarterly for each employee. So we have over 50 employees who have to inspect their gear once a quarter. And you can just imagine the amount of paper that goes through it just being wasted there. So we created basically one asset to rule them all. We made a PPE asset, and inside that we can inspect our hard hats, our boots, our gloves, safety vests, safety glasses, everything that we deem as a PPE necessity. We can basically check them out in one spot, and we can store them all in one spot. And again, it's clear lines of communication. So now we have the field inline worker being able to communicate directly to his or her manager from this actual task. There's an automation that once they put in a request for service or a note, the manager's emailed, and so right away we have that direct line of communication. And now we have every department functioning the same way. When you have 6 divisions, you know, everyone kind of did their own thing a little differently. And so we were able to kind of clean that up and bring it to a uniform process and really make that process streamlined. And then lastly, it's the same thing, first aid kits. We were able to take away, we do these, gosh, I don't even know how often we do these.
Once a quarter.
Oh, we do it once a quarter. There you go. And so we were able to do basically follow suit. So, I mean, it seems repetitive, but when something works, you work it, and you can really start to see the time reduction and the cost reduction when you really start to streamline this process. So if it works so well for the other 2, why couldn't it work here? And so we have these on a maintenance plan, and they go out once a quarter, and they're checked out by the responsible people. So the person who's responsible, for example, for checking 415 daily will also check that first aid kit. We have people who are responsible for checking the first aid kits throughout our shop, which is that top right corner, and also our remote locations. In that bottom left is one of our pumping stations for our water division. And then that's my sweet thumb and first aid kit and iPad because it works out super well. But I guess my biggest thing is we don't want to shy away from picking at that low hanging fruit. Sometimes it's the easiest things to automate and the easiest things to really tackle first that can make really huge impacts. When I ran the numbers for our daily vehicle check sheets, I was really flabbergasted when it came to looking at how much time was actually wasted in it. And if you would have asked me before I started that project, do we waste a lot of time doing this? I honestly would have said no, probably not. But when you really start to dive in and look at what you're doing with a critical eye, and you start to extrapolate some of that data that you make a priority to collect, it's amazing what you can discover and how quickly you can make an impact in your organization. So we also use dashboards inside Cartograph. It's a cool feature that allows us to get to information when 3 clicks is too many. I ran into one of our water crew leaders, and he was maligning the fact that he had to click 3 times to get to some information. And so we were able to start looking at ways to even streamline how we get our information inside our computers and iPads. So here's our dashboard. So we had no more tab hopping. We wanted to find a way that when someone opened their computer, they would see exactly what they wanted that was pertinent to them and was made opening their computer get their information that much faster. We are able to we're able to show exactly what jobs they're assigned to, what assets are important to them, and it's a really powerful tool. We use it here in this slide. This is our Public Works weekly report that we submit to our Office of the Village Manager, and we can, in one ginormous infographic, show how many requests we have opened and received and how many we've closed. Same thing with how many tasks we've done. And you can really start to just really use your software to really tell a compelling story in a very visually interesting way. So I don't know why we said be careful. Oh, so yeah, I didn't know. Remember. So we have to be careful. So the first time we submitted this to our village manager, it was sent back, and the response was, you need to tone it down because fire and police, they can't come close to making it look as nearly as well as yours does. So to that, I think we said, yeah, we could, but there's no kill switch on awesome. So I'm sorry, you kind of just have to deal with what we're giving you. Yeah. All right, so I think that basically wraps it up, and we're going to be open for Q&A, I suppose.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope that you were able to see some of the audience reactions during your presentation, because I think many of them were laughing and applauding and celebrating as much as I was, because this was a great presentation, a great jumping off point. And now is the time for us to ask you some questions and get some feedback from our attendees about how a similar program might be implemented in their local governments. And so our first question that we have is, and I think it goes back to Tom's section of the presentation, and that is, how do you convince employees who might be used to a paper and pencil system that it is their job to do data entry when you're moving to a digital data collection process?
Wow. Well, that's a great question. I think I'm still in the process of figuring this out, but I want to you you take it slow. First of all, it's really important to understand their perspective of things. But then the conversation, really has to. They really have to be a part of the conversation as you move this thing forward. Um, I found that once you can start showing them the results, it's one thing to just to say, hey, just do what I say in this case, but the results are very important, and as soon as you can start showing them the results, they don't look at it as a waste of time or something that they weren't doing prior. They start buying into the fact that, okay, all right, they understand more of the behind the scenes, more of the why, and why doing live entry while you're in the field is more accurate. I don't know if I've actually answered the question here. It really is a slow process.
Maybe talk about comparing to contractors version of it, like selling.
No, absolutely. So, everyone they're always worried about losing their jobs. Everyone is. And so you take the information, and we always want to look at ourselves. What are we doing, comparatively speaking, to a contractor? What are we doing better than them? And what are we not doing as good as them? And so, kind of like with the example, when we were contracting our tree trimming services prior to asset management, the guys were really a little discouraged. They actually thought it was the end of the world. They weren't looking at it as a help. Using the software, showing real time numbers, and then finding out that we were actually doing something far more expensive, as in landscape maintenance. They were quickly able to identify that, you know what, we're not losing our jobs. We're actually trying to get rid of something that we don't have time for, and we're able to focus our energy in more positive light. That's probably the better angle that actually helps in that case.
You can also talk about your agile meetings too, because that's in using some of those dashboards.
No, absolutely. Once a week my group gets together. All of our groups really get together, but we have a weekly agile discussion: what worked, what didn't work, what are we going to work on, and the process always kind of came up. It's cumbersome. It's not as fast. It's slow. But part of my job is to make it as easy as possible for them. So anywhere I can take out something that was slowing them down, I did. But I didn't know what was slowing them down until they told me. Until we had a discussion about it. Until I asked for it. And so that having being able to accept that sometimes you're wrong when you're setting a few things up, and being able to adapt to it and make changes really helps. Goes a long way.
We have a question on here, and I think you may have spoken to this, but it was expanding on the bullet that was compare us to contractors, and what you meant by that, and how you're using data to tell that story.
Yeah. So at Buffalo Grove, we're constantly tasked with, are we the best use of taxpayer money, right? And one option is to contract out the work that could be done, whether that's tree trimming or landscape maintenance, or any number of other things we do in public works. And we end up getting asked questions a lot if there's a joint bid that goes out, or some piece of data comes in, or even if it's just data that we get from another agency as far as how much their costs are to do something. We're constantly comparing ourselves to those outside agencies or outside contractors. So we try to collect the data internally to be able to respond to those. And that's really just keeping up with the labor, the equipment, the materials cost for each job we do. So that once that data is in the system, that's something that we can use to answer those questions that inevitably come up later.
All right, we have another question about the management of this type of transition, and it's creating a culture of accountability using an online or digital or asset management system.
Technology itself isn't going to change a culture, and I think that's more where you start going back to Gary Pisano's ideas of, having collaboration with individual accountability, or being psychologically safe, but having candid conversations amongst your group to really know, are we doing the best we can? Is there areas that we need to improve on? If we can't even talk about the areas that need improvement, you're not going to have that culture internally to be able to drive, some of that accountability and some of that other aspects that you need that might not be concrete technology driven things, but are more of the emotional intelligence, the emotional quotient side of what we need to do as leaders.
And then a question here about some GIS implementation plans. Anything to share on that?
So the GIS side, Buffalo Grove, I want to say 5-6 years ago now, we joined a local consortium. And I don't know how popular these are around the country, but here in Chicago, several different consortiums have been taking off, whether it be GIS consortiums or information technology driven consortiums. But communities are getting together to hire an outside firm to provide services where each individual community would not be able to afford the amount of employees they might need. So you might be able to, like in Buffalo Grove, we could afford one GIS specialist, but we wouldn't be able to afford a database specialist, a programmer, all these other kind of bigger ticket items. Where in the consortium atmosphere, we can share those services when we need them and have on-site resources on. For us, it's every 7 out of 10 days we have an on-site GIS specialist where we're not paying 100% of that time. We're not paying 100% of a big ticket employee on the top end. We're utilizing, the partnerships in the area to kind of price it out by need. And that's really where we found the GIS implementation piece for us.
Here are two questions that I think could be rolled into one. And it's this idea of internal accountability, but then how have you taken that storytelling out to the public and then also to your elected officials, board members?
Yeah, so the way this has been rolling out to the board lately is through our weekly reporting. There's a board report that gets generated on a weekly basis. It gets published on Thursdays and is pushed out to our board. That's really been our avenue to kind of start showcasing some of the things we've been working on and be able to share this data that, what once might have been a couple paragraphs about something we did is now more infographic driven. As far as sharing with the residents, part of that is the idea with the clarity video itself and that whole clarity aspect. It's great that we're doing good things in local government, but if we don't tell anybody about it, if we don't share those good stories with the residents, then, we're missing the boat.
A question about the actual mechanics, especially on the daily vehicle checks. What kinds of devices are you using? Have you had better success with any certain kind of tablet or computer? And what types of training did you need to provide to staff to complete those and to use those that hardware?
So for all three of the automations with daily vehicle check, first aids, and PPE, every village and public works employee is issued an iPhone, and so they can use the Cartograph One app on their phone, so that's always with them. We also supply iPads. It's roughly one iPad for every 2 employees, and so we use that as a way as well. And then most of our power users and admins are working off of a desktop. So I end up creating almost everything for them through my desktop and work collaboratively with them to make sure that it works the way we need it to work on phones and iPads. And in terms of training, I do a lot of one-on-one with our groups. I'm always accessible. I kind of work out in the middle of everywhere, so people are constantly coming to me. But it's a lot of team training. I'll sit with entire departments, and then beyond that, if someone has a an actual, a more individualized issue, I work one-on-one. But that's most of my job. So that's how we do all that stuff internally.
We have a question about the metrics that you track snow operations.
Yeah, so we track all of our data for snow and ice. So we're able to track how much tons of salt we put down per salting or per plowing. We can track the amount of liquids we use. We track our lane miles. We track our labor hours, our equipment costs. We track all that. And if you are a Cartograph user, I'd be happy to share a pretty sweet report that we have that basically breaks it down into we put each winter snow operation into a work order. And so we can see every snow route. We have 10. We can see every snow route. We can see how much each truck cost to do their route, how long it took to do their route. It's a pretty cool way to see what we're doing. But we track everything you can. Oh yeah, and we have. That's right. We track our temperature, our dew points, our humidities, our road temps, the wind. I mean, we have a ton of crazy stuff that it's crazy, I guess, but it's important to us. Yeah. But we track as much as we can, and we have built custom fields and layouts to really tailor that to what we're doing.
All right, and so I'll ask the last question, and it's what's next? What are you planning on for the future? What are you working on now? What enhancements are you building into your job?
Well, for me personally, I'm really working hard with our fleet department to roll them from CFA into Cartograph, and so that's really where a lot of my focus is in terms of making a way into that. It's been some slow going, and it's going to be, I think, a little bit more to it. But that's where I'm really looking for is how to bring those mechanics who have always felt kind of like I don't want to say like they felt like not part of the team, but they were always kind of their own little island, to really pull them into the whole big BGPW Cartograph team and make them successful. So that's what I'm working on. Yeah, the CFA challenge. That's exactly right.
And just a little more globally here at the Village, we are now reaching out to our police and fire departments to see what we can help out with there. So, vehicle checks is something that the fire department does every day also. And, since we've got a system in place, we're working with them as a team to do that. And we'll further integrate, with our fleet maintenance as they roll into Cartograph. So again, trying to get all that data that we can just entered in one place and flowing through the organization as a whole, not just Public Works as a whole.
From the forestry side of this thing, the goal for the immediate future coming up here for us is to customize some views where we can establish risk in our trees, in our urban canopy. And so, many of us have gone through tree risk assessment qualification, and there are, many like fields and avenues where we can establish what the risk is. And so for us to be able to put that into one system without having to write it on a separate form is going to be very beneficial. It takes a little time to get it started in the beginning, but then once we do, it's going to work out and pay a lot of dividends to have that information there and house it all.
All right, well, we have come to the end of today's webinar, and a huge thanks to the Norsemen for a great presentation. Thanks to all of our attendees for participating and sharing your time with EL. And as a reminder, we have recorded this webinar, and it will be available online soon at elgl.org. And I also saw some requests for links in that box, and so that we add some links to that information if it's available. You can reference the hashtag ELGLJam on Twitter to review and share your thoughts from today's discussion. And as a reminder, if you share something that you learned using that hashtag, you could win your very own Norseman hat. You can stay in touch with the Norsemen online, and we'll also include their contact information on this recording and the blog post for the webinar, so you can stay connected. And with that, I'll end the webinar. Thank you for your support of ELGL and for participating today.